If you're a business owner out there, if you have a team, an internal team, you've hired a team, hired a freelancer, whatever it is, your job became more about who you can trust to make the right decisions for what you're watching. And when we're talking about like in-app ROAS, top-line measurement, MPIs, all this stuff is hard, it's convoluted, but it can be very, very simple.
Hello.
We're live. Surprise.
Surprise, surprise. It's a surprise tier 11 live. So we're last week's show was a lot of fun. That was the most fun I've had in an wow, that sort of shows the lameness of my life. That was the most fun I had all week. How about that? I'll take out the weekend because I know I'd piss off my wife. She's like, what about we had a great time together? I'm like, yeah, but my time with John Moran was actually a lot of fun during the week. So
I know I'm always, very cautious whenever I say like, man, that was the most fun I've ever had. I mean, besides like my wedding day and the day that I met you, honey.
Right? That's right.
And if my kids are like, and when you were born,
we'll just have to make a pact, like never send these recordings to our wives, but they probably subscribe to our channels and our socials. So like, there's nothing we can do anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. We just gotta like the day that we know we're going live, we just like pre-buy flowers.
That's right. Just have, I think a standing order, I think from a florist every Friday, just knowing we're gonna say something that are gonna piss off the wives. Here.
I like to schedule out 52 weeks in advance. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I said on YouTube.
Yeah, that's it. In advance. I don't know. I can't be held accountable or reliably, sort of responsible for what I might say live. So anyway, so we are live here. Hopefully, we did this last minute because John, you're tied up on Friday. Not tied up, but you're tied up speaking somewhere. I actually didn't even know where you're at. Yeah, like where are you? Yeah, they might tie you up, but where are you speaking on Friday, actually?
Yeah, so I'll be in Times Square in New York City speaking at the Affiliate Summit East.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So I speak on Monday, but Saturday we do like the sound checks and everything like that. It's supposed to be like 6,500 or 7,500 people there. Yeah. So for my stage fright, it's gonna be great. I'm not gonna be nervous at all. This is what I'm comfortable with. When I see everyone staring at me, I'm like, "Whoa, how's it going?" I don't. I all of a sudden I blink and I do deer in headlights on stage, and then I have lights on me, and I can't stand stage speaking. It sucks. I hate it.
Well, I don't know, but I don't think. I mean, I've seen you speak live plenty of times. Like once you get into your thing, it's like I think you just sort of forget the fact that people are staring at you. It's like it's the beginning of it that's always the hardest. I find.
Yeah, like when that's always like, oh, you gotta like imagine the entire audience is naked. My mind just immediately goes with, am I naked? And then and then it's weird.
It's just a strange thing. I used to teach public speaking back when I was in the corporate world, and I always told people who had a lot of stage fright is memorize your first 15 seconds. So much so that you never even, because that's the hardest part, really, because you're up there and you're like, holy crap, I'm in front of the audience. You got a presentation, but like, how do you segue into it? And remember, like I still do that to this day and rehearse that like 20 times. And then the rest of the thing kind of comes naturally once you get into the flow. Like stuff you're going to be talking about here today. Like you don't have to rehearse this, even though we did have a pre-call to kind of go through it. It's like you just know it. But I find like it's the transitionary periods, it's like the beginning of the end that people get kind of freak out about. So, but I know you do great. So
yeah, it's very true. My first like 5 minutes, I'm like, so I'm John. I do things on Google.
I'm Rand.
And then at the end, all of a sudden, sometimes my last slide surprises me, and then I just finish with, and that's it.
I've been a Googleaholic for 15 years.
Google anonymous.
Yeah, Google's anonymous. Well, you're so much more. You're so much more than
the paid traffic.
Yeah, addicted to paid traffic. Yeah, nonstop, 24 hours a day. Yeah. Well, today, I think people know you as like a Google guy. I always sort of phrase this is that people, and I even talked to, I had a team with, or a call this morning with two of the guys on our executive team, just because we were planning out some of the acquisition stuff that we're doing right now. And we were talking about you, and they're like, well, somebody said, well, John's traffic. I'm like, no, John is not traffic. John is strategy. He has a traffic bent to it, but he also realizes creative is super important, and he understands that he's not the greatest maybe at creative, which is the reason why we're acquiring this creative company, which is going to be great because they're going to be a great partner. We've been working with them for 9 months. We know that they're super smart, but like you get like the high level strategy of what's best for the client. And that's the thing that, and then you say, all right, well, what's my traffic strategy? Well, part of traffic strategy is creative. You realize like you're not the guy who's going to go do like, script the video and do all that sort of stuff. We've got people that do that, but you realize like, top of the funnel, like at awareness and then consideration, and ultimately action and conversion, like there's different types of creatives that do all that. So, but what you really understand, and what we'll talk about here today, is the higher level strategy of like, what's the goal of the client? What do they really want? Not what they want like today or yesterday and, whipsaw the team into saying, I really like that creative. Let's run more of that. And it's not in line with the goal. And we're going to talk about a client, which will remain anonymous, where the goal was secondary to sort of a strategy that was come upon with no inkling or no insight into the achievement of the goal.
Yeah, it's almost like the top line goal, and then as to which the secondary goal was measured to make sure that the top line goal is on track, sort of became the priority at the sacrifice of the top line goal.
Right.
And the number one reason why, before you and I linked up together and I joined Tier 11, the number one reason why people would reach out to me is to solve business problems through marketing.
Yes.
Or I guess I would say in tandem of marketing. It wasn't because, I knew the best bidding strategy. My opinion, traffic is fairly easy. Creative is actually way harder than traffic. I mean, as long as you have access to Google Ads, you can run a campaign in 10 minutes.
Sure.
I mean, honestly, you may not even have conversion tracking, but that's whatever. Fine.
Well, sure, who cares? That doesn't really matter sometimes.
Exactly. But the top line goal, as to which it's a harder question to say, like, hey, can you get a 400 ROAS? Yes. Hey, can you double my company? Oh, but those two should be synonymous, and it's not, and it's scary, and I don't know why.
They're usually two separate things.
Right. Traffic is just the test to which does your business work.
Yeah, exactly. Like no amount of traffic or traffic strategy in the world is going to make up for the fact that you might not have a product that people don't want.
Right. Yeah. I always made the joke, be like, if you only sell one shoe, this is going to not go well.
So at a base level, sell two shoes.
Right.
There's a very small market. There's a very small one shoe market out there, but yeah, let's not go down that road. That's
left-handed water bottles.
Left-handed water bottles. Potentially, or one arm for people with one arm. Anyway, no, I don't know where we're going on that one. The point is that the big goal is the most important thing, and the marketing tactics are the things that get you to the big goal. And what people hire for ultimately, and I think we see this now with a lot of our clients. I think they are getting it. I see this with prospects that we speak to. We talk to dozens of businesses every single week about this, is that marketing is a means to an end. An agency is a means to the end, and the end is the growth of the business in a profitable way. And that typically includes acquiring new customers at a cost that makes financial sense. That could mean, having a return on ad spend immediately, or it could mean break even because you have a lifetime value that actually substantiates that customer acquisition cost to start off with. And then obviously growing that customer base through repeat purchases, additional products. That's really what marketing is. That's the goal of marketing. And then the goal is the growth of the organization reaching their growth goals. But then at the end of that, the goal of the goal is to achieve their vision. Like if I do this, then I help this many people achieve whatever my objective happens to be. And that's the big, big goal. But taking it back to what we're doing, marketing is just a means to get to those goals. And I think that's where you excel and understand, and we're infusing that methodology into tier 11, because quite honestly, a year ago, 2 years ago, we were still talking about marketing tactics. We're still talking about in-app ROAS.
Yeah. And it's a weird phenomenon where it's almost like when you take a step back, if you're a business owner out there, if you have a team, an internal team, you've hired a freelancer, whatever it is, your job became more about who you can trust to make the right decisions for what you're watching.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're talking about like in-app ROAS, top line measurement, MPIs, all this stuff is hard, is convoluted, but it can be very, very simple. It can be very simple. Now, the execution and the strategy being implemented and maintained and measured and all that stuff, that is, obviously multiple full-time jobs. But the synchronization between stakeholders never happens. And it's actually the simplest thing when you boil it down. Like let's bring this down to the simplest way that we possibly can. If you are running a lemonade stand, you have one job that day: sell lemonade.
Right.
What is your goal to sell lemonade? I want to sell at least 2 gallons of lemonade. And then someone comes in and says, yes, but the traffic on the street doesn't seem as quality. It's like, what did we sell today? We sold 3 gallons of lemonade, but this street over here has a less traffic. It's like, I don't care. Like the goal is achieved. And everything else underneath that goal is noise if it's not talking about that top line goal. Now that gets very hard when you have a vice president of, marketing, and then you have a person underneath them that understands digital marketing tactics a little bit more, that is then speaking with even an internal team, an external team, or a freelancer of what they think should happen. And then there's interpretation on the other side, but then that also has to go to the creative department, that then also has to be talked about to the media buyers, that then also has to be re-strategized based on how does that how does that be implemented? Those are where everything breaks down and everyone circles around. They did their job. It's not their fault that you didn't reach your goal. But that's because they were measuring something else. What was important to them? What's important to creative is not important to strategy. What's important to strategy is not important to media buyers. What's important to media buyers has nothing to do with the top line goal. That's where this whole thing spirals out of control. That's actually a case study that we have today to say that things were going very good. Things started to not go as good. And the conversations that we're having today were actually should not be happening because of the stakeholders not technically looking at the bigger picture on sort of all sides. And that's what it can be very simplified.
Yeah. So if we take a step back here, we've talked in our first YouTube live a bit about marketing performance indicators, and we're actually working on a resource that you'll be able to download so you can sort of follow along. A goal here is to go through all of them individually and then highlight through case studies why each one is important and how it relates and how it's different than maybe the way that you used to do marketing or your team used to do marketing in the past. So one of the things I think with today's case study and the conversation is the idea of marketing efficiency ratio and MER just in general. Maybe you can go through like, what is MER? I know people it sort of became a buzzword after the iOS 14 update, and then people got away from it, but it still hasn't really gone anywhere. It's like it's still there. And I mean, the smart companies measure their effectiveness or their efficiency of their media through this metric, but I find a lot don't. They still kind of go back. It depends on the maturity of the organization, but even more mature organizations sometimes forget it as well.
Well, attribution for some reason trumps MER. And that's what I don't get. Attribution should never trump MER.
What do you mean by that?
So attribution means that we are getting a 10x, but these are the channels contributing to that as best as I can understand. And we say that the media efficiency ratio is not really tracked, not really measurable, not really understood, not really. It's kind of like the if your attribution is good, you should be able to achieve a better MER. And that's actually never the case. It never is. Your media efficiency ratio is at a 10, and how you see that being attributed is secondary. That is just the best trackable result as to why that's a 10. It's not, we'll see how Meta's doing better than Google. It has a higher ROAS. So if I push more into this, that means my media efficiency ratio should be higher. And that's what people typically do, is they look at attribution. They try to figure out the why, and they try to force a why rather than understanding the traffic flow and how it's attributed, which means each channel will only measure a portion of that person's journey only to the ad spend in that channel. It's not the channel bringing people awareness and selling them and then reselling them forever through that one campaign that has a good ROAS. People don't understand that when traffic flows through through a customer journey, you're measuring, well, Facebook started, Google captured, emails sold, SMS resold. What happens is they try to upset the traffic flow by pushing harder in one portion of the journey, and they're wondering why. Exactly. And so attribution never trumps it. It should be okay if I see that my 10x MER means that this portion started here, continued here, converted here, reconverted here. In order to keep a ratio, a media efficiency ratio, all cash in, all cash out, your all cash in needs to be divided by how much journey did each area produce, and add in the ad spend equally to those journeys. Because it's an asinine thing to think about out loud and make a suggestion on, well, if we just started more people, but we didn't continue with the more education, we didn't continue to try to convert them more, we didn't continue to try to reconvert them more, trust us, if we just push here, everything else will follow suit. It's paid media. You can't, if you say, hey, I have 10 shoes in my warehouse, but I can sell more shoes if I just make the doors wider, I'll get to 20 sales. It's like, no, that's not how that works. So you don't just make the door wider. You have to grow the doors, the warehouse, the products. I mean, you think about it like, okay, well, after step one, don't just be like, step one, more ad spend. Step two, profit. Like it's not, that's not how it works. So that's where attribution, for some reason, trumps MER in most cases, and that's typically the downfall of optimization.
So the biggest fault of marketers right now that you see is that they are over relying upon attribution and single channels and siloing, as opposed to looking at the bigger picture, which really is what MER is, if I'm understanding you correctly. Can you define for us, I know you've got a whiz-bang graphic on MER, but just so people are understanding of this, because I think there's lots of marketers that are yelling from the mountaintops, it's all about MER, but then nobody really knows how to apply it. And I think it's
very difficult. Yeah,
it is. That's where the challenge is, because there are some unknowns that are in there. And I think the case study we're going to talk about here today, there were some gaps in some of those areas. Like we weren't even looking at like our Amazon, which is part of the journey. Like you can't tell me that paid traffic at top of funnel, especially if you sell on Amazon, you're not factoring in your Amazon organic and your Amazon paid into the entire, like you can't silo Meta and Google together without looking at the entire ecosystem. And that also goes for email, SMS, organic, direct, all of that. All of it.
Brand, Amazon, exactly.
On-brand, Amazon, you name it. Like they all contribute to each other. And I think that's so hard for people to wrap their heads around. They're like, yeah, Ralph, that's great. It sounds great in theory, but I still need to control all my channels because I don't have an unlimited budget. Yeah, I get that too. But like what we're trying to do here is get people to think differently about how this whole thing works, because it doesn't work in individual silos. It just doesn't. And it never has.
Not since the beginning of time.
No. Human nature hasn't changed.
Right. That's the thing too, is like for some reason we believe that it's still like they see an ad, they click, they buy. No.
Yeah.
There's 4,000 ads an hour to people. Like, why is yours special? The first time, the only time.
It's,
Yeah.
it just doesn't exist. And
No.
the other side to this, which at some point we'll get our creative folks in on these YouTube lives, is to persuade all the way down the journey. The creative then becomes really, really important. Now, the creative actually on the top end, like you have to do the research and you have to figure out what are the hooks, what are my avatars. This is old school marketing and advertising. Like, what are the things that are actually going to get their attention? What's the new and shiny thing that's different in an undifferentiated market that makes me stand out versus everyone else?
Yeah. What do you do better than your competitor?
What do you do better than your competitor? And just because you have a whiz bang, top of funnel, awareness type of ad where you're getting people sort of engaged doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to carry all the way through. You have to actually persuade them with different types of creative, different types of messaging all the way through until they ultimately probably do a Google search, check it out, and then Google, brand or a high value keyword gets the ultimate credit from an attribution standpoint, and everything else is discounted because like the last couple of clicks came from Google or came from the email sequence if they're on your opt-in list. And that's where I think we see a lot of folks really getting confused. And the first thing that we try to do is, and I'm not saying we're perfect at this, is we try and sort through the data as much as we can, and then
every single client, company, business, region, 100% unique.
Yeah.
This is why when I get asked of John, what's the best? I'm like, the first thing I'm like, well, it depends, and pisses people off. But if you just said this is the best bidding strategy, you're useless.
Yeah,
you are.
Right.
Because you're going to hurt half the people and help the other half of the people.
For sure. Or maybe just help that one and hurt like 9 others, because it is that different.
Yeah.
So let's get back to it's not.
I'll make one last screen share point on this.
Yeah.
And this is where I think
love screen shares.
I know screen shares are the best. I can't talk without screen shares. It doesn't work in my brain.
Like when you're getting together with friends on the weekends and you're trying to tell a story, do you end up like having to bring your iPad or like your phone and then like do a presentation to them?
It's nice that you think I have friends.
I see you at a cookout, like with your phone, like explaining some joke.
I'm just like, read this.
I don't need to explain it. Here's my screen share.
Right.
All right.
This is the best part.
This is good.
The best part. So we're getting a 4. This is blended ROAS and Wicked. This is media efficiency ratio. All cash in, all cash out.
Reports.
I know. We'll get that updated. This is something that we'll let them know, kind of like it's some new nomenclature. But blended ROAS is a 4.02. Okay. In the same time period, paid traffic, all paid traffic MER, all paid traffic ROAS, I guess I would say, is 1.77. So how do you get from a 1.77 to a 4? It's because we're paying to track just the portions of those journeys. That is a very, very hard thing to understand, because people think, no. If I got a click, it will track that person forever perfectly. That's never the case. And so that's where it's very hard for third-party attribution tools. It's very hard for people that are running the media buying to say, they never ask themselves, what if I didn't track that sale? Like, what if the sale that came in, I don't see that in this campaign? Once you start that thought process, now you can actually see what is really moving the needle. And most people are not in a position to actually care enough to ask themselves that question. They really say is, if that's not a 4, I get fired.
Right. And then it becomes, and then they make their decisions based upon I don't want to get fired.
Right.
Question.
Right. It's, why is your campaign horrible? Well, if I just measure the last step, it's going to look fantastic, but that won't grow your business. But if I just measure the first step, it's going to look fairly terrible, like 1.77. You're going to get mad. Probably. But if the top line MER target was 4, now, great job. Keep starting people on the journey. I don't care what that looks like.
So I guess like to that question, maybe we can get into the case
Let's
study
get
here
the case
because this
study.
sort of explains this. Is how do you figure that out? I guess there's that messy middle where you have to sort of figure out how do I allocate my ad spend in order to reach the optimal MER.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly right. Yep. And that's the part that is unique. And that's why I love case studies, because the complexity as to which the measurement has to be done post MER is what is usually hard and very, very expensive. Okay. But it has to be, I'm just going to blur some stuff out here.
And just for people who are, I think we have maybe some newer folks. Like we're starting to get some questions rolling in here, which is great. Definitely ask your questions here of us. We'll get to those sort of after the case study. But just for those who might not be aware of what MER is, explain to everyone what media efficiency ratio actually is. It's quite the little acronym.
Yeah. So media efficiency ratio simply stands for all of your marketing dollars that you spend divided by all of the revenue that you're receiving.
Yeah.
So it's actually all the revenue you're receiving divided by the money that you spend, but it's a simple ratio. Think of it like, if you know ROAS is company ROAS.
Right.
It's the best way to do it.
And that will include Amazon as well, like all channels, not just Shopify. So, and not
all cash in,
but we're going to talk about that here. Is I think when you start separating them out, thinking that paid media and what happens on Amazon is two separate things. This is an e-commerce brand that we're going to be talking about here. Like, that's a huge mistake. It's a huge mistake, because you're not really looking at MER. You're still looking at a channel. You're like, oh, well, my organic and my paid on Amazon is doing great. Well, where do you think that organic awareness is actually coming from?
Or maybe are you bidding on your brand?
Are you bidding on your brand? Right. And that's your paid. Like, where do you think that's coming from? Or like a high value, I always say high value, but high intent based keyword in your niche. And what those things are. And you even skip the optimization. Like, if this non-brand keyword works in Google, then you can also maybe have that work in Amazon. But what's funny is you may get the first click on Amazon, but your product that they want maybe isn't on Amazon because it's a SKU that's not there. And then they buy from your website. Like, these things go both ways. I've seen it before. Or they buy from your competitor.
Right. Yeah. Let's jump into this case.
Okay, let's go.
Amazing stuff.
Yep.
So I'm gonna full screen some stuff here because I want to talk about a journey, and you probably have all been on this journey, whether you're a business owner, whether you're a media buyer, whether you're an agency. Everyone's been on this journey, and I want to explain some simple things that are good and bad and what happened. So this is how my brain sort of works. Like, this is your brain on John drugs. If you see,
there's a lot of drugs too.
A lot of drugs. Yeah. I love drugs. So if you look at the sales here, we see, kind of a really nice year-over-year ramp. Now we see the traffic is a really nice year-over-year traffic.
That's a beautiful slide up until
very, very good.
Just recently.
What was that, like a 35-degree angle? Beautiful. Now,
that's lovely.
Right. Now, here's what's funny is there was a strategy update. Now, this is before I got here, so it's easier for me to identify, because me being more new to tier 11, I can say, aha, I see what happened here. And this is what we are focusing on, is a singular small subset of goals for the client to achieve, regardless of how we got there.
Right.
Now, what we see here is there is a client goal, a company goal, to reach $12 million in annual sales. And it was on track to do that. Now, there was a pivotal point here, kind of in March and February, where we see that there is a February traffic going from 257,000 users to 264,000 users, but we see the revenue go from 683 down to 513. Like, there was like a aha, like a why, a what happened here. Everything was going so well. There was a pivotal point.
Yeah.
Now, the way that this has been measured recently is by an NCAC target. The NCAC target was kind of all of a sudden after this change here not currently being met. And because that NCAC target was, in my opinion, measured incorrectly and not being met, it caused pullback. So this is not a, let me just stop sharing here because I'm going to do a different screen. I'm very cautious about ever sharing the client information. So we're going to have to do a little bit of rejigging here on my screen. Okay, good.
And while you're doing that, I'm just going to define NCAC in case you're new to this channel here. New customer acquisition cost. New.
Yep.
These are people who have not bought before. We have another metric for people who have bought before, or all people who buy. But NCAC is one of the MPIs, one of the marketing performance indicators that's so vital, and one of the ones that you use constantly in order to measure the health of the growth of new customers who didn't know who this customer or who didn't know who this client was, and now they bought from them for the first time.
Yep. Now, fun fact, I found out after I started to investigate that the NCAC target was only on people who were purchasing through their Shopify site, but not the other half of the people that were purchasing on Amazon. And an issue that as you sell a higher price product, that is also, has some shipping tied to it, and it's a heavier, larger product, people want to buy on Amazon because they know they can get it free tomorrow. And that is the case here. So measuring half of the global metric of NCAC, we're not measuring all customers. We're only measuring customers on a small subset. That was the simple measurement here is what kind of pushed this into the wrong area. I'll share with you what I mean.
Yeah.
This here was going up and going down. Obviously very simple, going up, going down, orders going up, going down. If there was an inefficiency, this would have continued on this way and this would have gone down. Now that's an inefficiency. Mm-hmm. This here, in my opinion, was more like a self-fulfilling prophecy. We didn't start pulling back because of this. This started going down because of this. And you say, well, John, there was a time period where you said that there was more users here and less sales. That is actually true. Yes. The issue that we saw, let me just switch this over here so that I can get back into my other view. There we are. Sorry for the hot potato on screen share, but very susceptible to never, share client information. So I want to use this as a case study, not as a specific example.
Yeah.
The reason as to why February and March went up here and the February March dipped down here was there was an internal discussion that happened on our client side. This is, we should start to test other products. The reaction as to which
is
11,
unfair, no. That's not unreasonable.
Not at all.
It's a fine idea. However,
absolutely. The execution though was not measured correctly, and that's where and on all parties for good measure though, for what everyone believed was actually the health of the business, which is there was no egregious. It was just a little bit off target. And what ended up happening is we would like to test other products. Okay. The pivotal moment was let's allocate ad spend appropriately and additional ad spend appropriately. What ended up happening, and this is what's beautiful, is what ended up happening is when other products were introduced, a lot of agencies, media buyers, clients would agree, let's pull some ad spend from over here and push it into the other products to test. Everyone on this call probably says, yes, I've done that before. I've reallocated ad spend and try to diversify my product line. We had a fairly high concentration on a singular small group or a singular product, and we wanted to build our fortress into diversification. It's like a stock portfolio.
Not a bad idea.
Makes total sense.
Yep.
What ended up happening though was the pullback on the best-selling item was kind of the tipping point into the reduction. So the tipping point into the reduction was these other products aren't doing as good as our main product. That was not yet seen. What ended up happening was NCAC was affected. NCAC, the cost per acquired first-time customer, went up. It was more expensive to get customers.
Right.
Now, the flag there is, okay, these other products here aren't as good as our main product.
Were they more expensive? Were they same price range? I'm not familiar.
Yeah, they're slightly more expensive, but the volume, the conversion rates, everything started to falter a bit.
Okay.
So it was interesting on this. Now let's take a step back here, because everything you're saying is, John, yeah, we've probably all been in this type of situation before. But the total top line target, the total goal was 12 million in annual sales. Mm-hmm. So a very simplistic thinking was, well, what if we just kept the traffic going here and kept the sales going here by not pulling any sort of ad spend out of the best-selling item, but by adding more items with incremental spend, but at appropriate levels so that it doesn't hurt NCAC too much, which is a metric we're measuring, but to still keep us on track of the goal of the $12 million.
So keep going with the ad spend on the best-selling product that's obviously in a nice trajectory at a 35-degree angle, but then add additional budget for testing this other product, maybe at a lower spend, and sort of get your messaging right, sort of figure out your economics, figure out your hooks, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Ad copy, audience
Ad
testing.
copy, all that.
You're restarting, honestly.
But the spend was reallocated as opposed to added in the other, because that's like a beautiful looking chart.
Right.
And I think, so what we're talking about here is not a traffic question. What we're talking here is a business question. It's a fundamental strategy for a business to want to diversify into other products. Makes total sense. However, at the expense of what?
Yep.
You have to sort of think about this, think through it, especially if you've got a nice trend line. Like ad spend equals new customers at a CAC that actually makes sense, or an NCAC that makes sense. You take away that, all of a sudden, the business fundamentals change.
And that's what was interesting is we ended up slightly measuring incorrectly. And I'll just screen share here, and I blurred this out here. This here, for example, this was the best selling item right here. There was 58,000 landing page sessions in the last 30 days, which is 53% lower than February of this year, which is the tipping point of going from our best-selling February to our decline in March. At this time right now, we are 53% less than where we were in February. That's first item number one to think about. Okay, we're 53% down in traffic and conversion. We're 53% down in global
best-selling product
on the best-selling product,
which has proven itself. All things being equal here, you know, that sometimes this happens. Like you have to shift. I mean, we've had many customers that say, "Hey, we're going like gangbusters, but we ran out of inventory and we have supply chain issues and we can't actually manufacture." Like that's happened. I can think of a dozen things off the top of my head. So you have to shift almost, but these guys didn't have that problem.
No, and that was what was interesting is it was sort of a, if we measured correctly, like if there was a person on the call that says, okay, if we test other products, how does that help us continue to grow to our $12 million goal?
Exactly.
Bingo. And that's where all stakeholders have to measure the same thing. Going back to the beginning of the podcast, when I say, well, this person measuring that, this person measuring that, there's maybe a vice president of marketing that says, hey, let's test more products. And the other person on the other side says, yeah, that seems reasonable. But now maybe the other stakeholder that is measuring the top line goals says, hey, why did we all of a sudden hit a crest and start going down? Those are all of things that measurement is so extremely important. And the way as to which it was measured starts to get now into my other thing where attribution trumps MER. So I'm going to share screen again, because this is kind of also the explanation as to why it was okay to do this in the beginning. When we look at this here, this measurement piece, this is measuring quarterly revenue targets and quarterly spend targets. And you can all see here that it was set up for beautiful success and was profitable, and there was a pullback when there should have been a push. So the reason why this came up is the client says, hey, I believe that we're spending more money and we're not necessarily achieving more. That feeling is correct. The media efficiency ratio stayed about the same at scale and actually got a little bit better at the drop, but the top line goal was still ignored. The reaction as to which their suggestion was, hey, I believe we should pull back in paid revenue, in paid media. Well, when you look at a graph that's going up and then going down, if we pull back more sessions, more users, more clicks, that revenue is not going to hit that top line goal.
Yeah.
And this is proven out by MER. Here's where it was proven by MER. Q1 revenue was 2.25. Spend was 690. That gave us a 322 MER. This is what MER is. Spend 690,000, get 2.2 million, 3.22 media efficiency ratio. The goal, though, the revenue targets needed to be higher. So you'll see how the revenue targets go up as it goes further down. Now, these two are reset because of the issue, but you'll see that it goes from 2, it would be going to 2, then to 3, then to 4, closer to 5. So the spend should go from 6 to 9 to 1.3 to, you see how it starts to go up here.
Mm-hmm.
Then when things started to not go as great, you see a pullback. 541,000 developed 2.1 million. Well, that that reduction actually made it 3.86 MER.
Sure.
That became even, more profitable. Right. We all know that when you scale, things get a little bit tighter. When you pull back, things look a little bit easier because you've already paid for the users that were going to buy anyway.
Right.
So economies of scale work both ways. Now, what was interesting is when you're looking at this, if I'm someone in an ownership position, my question, which was my question to the team when I first started reviewing this, was, well, if we needed our revenue target to go up, why did our spend go down? Very simple. And the catalyst was, well, we decided to test other products, and it was kind of agreed upon that the reallocation of funds would be used for diversification. Fast forward now a few months later, and now we're off goal. And now we're wondering why we're not hitting our target. Well, it was simply because of that one decision. And that's where I think all stakeholders need to discuss, what is it that we need to do to achieve the continuation of what we're doing. It may be not necessarily reallocating spend. It's not channel. It's not revenue. It's actual, adding an ad spend to what is working to a point where that would be the point of diminishing return. And last thing I'll say is the reason why I believe most people think that attribution trumps MER is, as the way that it is currently measured. Is my screen being shared? I don't see it here. Oh, there it is.
Yep.
This is the revenue distribution trend. Paid media delivered 900K. Okay. But organic 615,000 means that no one ever Googled their brand name organically, which Never. I find, that's impossible. And then email delivered 156, but no one ever signed up for an email that came from paid media. So that's another thing that's impossible.
Never.
And then Amazon organic, meaning that no one ever Googled the brand name on Amazon ever from a paid media and made 371,000. And we never bid on our brand name in Amazon for 371,000.
But so John, wait a second. People see an ad, they click and they buy. Like, that's how it works.
For the first time, it's 100% of the time. It works every time.
100% of the time. 100% of buyers see your ad, click on it, on that ad, get the attribution back to that individual channel, and then they buy. And that's the way that people, like, what's wrong? I don't get it.
Yeah. And what's interesting is this is where MER is healthy. However, because we're measuring siloed, the suggestion, which I would disagree with, is this has to go down. None of these would ever be affected, and we just need to take that ad spend that we use to direct it there and test maybe other channels. Well, that's the existing conversation that we had when we took a step back and we started to investigate a little bit. It's actually, if we're 53% down on our best selling item and we're seeing a 40% reduction in the last 30 days compared to our best month, very, very good trend. If we push back in there, would MER hold? If so, we are now back on track to our $12 million annual revenue target that we all set out to achieve last year.
So the resolution of this is that I think this is we're talking about like something that was an oversight. I mean, the business is still doing well, but it's not doing as well as it could have if we had looked at it this particular way. And this is just sometimes what happens. Like, you have to be able to course correct. You have to be able to test things. I get it. All that stuff is
5 steps forward, 1 step back. Okay. We're on that 1 step back right now.
We're on just a step back. Like, this is what happens in media buying. This is what happens when you work with an agency.
In business.
In business, like, oh my God. Well, sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 5 steps back. But, the point is that, like, that's business. That's life. It's not going to all be like a perfect chart, lower left-hand corner, upper right-hand corner all the time, because humans are involved in this, and they're going to make decisions that maybe aren't in the best interest of the big goal. The other part to this, which I think is super important, and when we talked about this prior to getting on this live here today, I was like, who is looking at the Amazon and the organic side of the equation, or is it just so siloed? And this is where I think clients and customers, I would say clients love to do this. And I can think of a half a dozen off the top of my head that are tier 11 clients right now. They're like, well, we're not going to give you guys credit for any of our Amazon or organic or our email sales. It's just going to be paid media. And then you're going to be held to that accountability, going back to attribution, right? Mm-hmm. For just the paid channels. Then my question to you before we actually talked about this is, are we factoring in Amazon? Are we factoring in all these other things with regard to MER? And I forget what the answer to that question was. I think we were looking at, because we're on the paid side, we were looking primarily on the paid.
Yeah, MER actually was never measured, which was interesting.
Okay, so that's sort of the big idea here, really.
It was a NCAC KPI. If this looks good, we hold tight.
Got it.
But the top line goal was 12 million. If the top line goal is 12 million in sales, I would assume you mean 12 million in profitable sales. Right. Which means you take into consideration your gross profit, your net profit, those things like that. Which means you then come out to a blended ROAS, also known as MER, which is, if I need to get to 12 million, how much can I spend? You can spend $4 million, no more, in 1 year time to make 12 million, and I will be happy. Excellent. That means we always have to keep and maintain a 3 MER. Mm-hmm. That had nothing to do with testing other products. Didn't. We're on track.
Yeah.
So testing other products was now this is changing the goal. Our goal no longer is 12 million in annual sales. Our new goal is, can we diversify our products to a healthy amount? Now, if we said, I need you to keep a $12 million goal, but also add in 80% more SKUs into the equation. Wait a minute. That's like saying take Toys R Us and turn it into Home Depot and continue on the sales trend. It's like we're selling different products now.
Yeah. So you've completely changed like the fundamentals of the company.
Exactly. Now it's the same product, but it's untested, which means if it will only put the goal in jeopardy.
So if you want to diversify, into different products, and you've got one bestseller that's just continuing to do well, like, don't take ad spend or media spend. I'm not going to say I'm going to say media spend just in general away from that best product. How do you test the other? Because this is a question for a lot of businesses. They're like, well,
absolutely.
I'm kind of a one product wonder, but I've got like all these other SKUs that I want to sell and I want to test. How do you do it in such a way so that you don't harm the big goal?
That's the beauty of MER. It's the beauty of MER. So, for example, if you have one product that looks like that 35-degree angle for the last 2 years, you continue on with that. The other products are now a separate meeting to discuss. Right. It means, what are we continue to do to keep on the trend? Then the next 30, 60, 90, 120, 50 days, we are adding 10, 20, 30% in ad spend over that course of that main product. And here's the creative, and here's the traffic, and here's new customers, all that. Here's how we measure Amazon. That all stays exactly the same as we have been doing for 2 years. Right. Next step, what incremental ad spend, what separate additional ad spend can we use to test these other products at a safe level to what? Never fall below a global 3 MER.
Right.
If you add in an ad spend to new products and it gets a 2.5 and your main product is getting a 3.5, you have still a 3x media efficiency ratio profitable MER. If you add in more ad spend and things get worse, you pull back, but you're still focused on what has gotten you there in the first place and not upset that.
Right. I mean, it depends on how much you're spending. I mean, if you're spending 10,000 on one and $1 million on the other, like a 3.5 versus a 2.5, it's going to skew things. It's not going to be exactly a 3. But the point is like you have to test it in a separate like sandbox silo and keep things going in the right direction for your primary product.
Right. I mean, if you're getting a 2.5 and your top line is getting a 3.5, you're not like scale the 2.5. I mean, you can until a point where it drags it down so much now that you're not profitable. But those are things, again, those are things like, okay, now more audience testing, more creative testing, more channel testing. Like that is now project number 2.
That's project 2, right?
Exactly.
And I would submit to you like a 2.5 right out of the gate out of a new product that you've never sold before. Like that's pretty good. All you need is you need to then go over to the creative side and say, hey, you know, these hooks and these angles and these videos and this, you know, particular way of positioning it in the marketplace versus competition for that separate product. Like we're gaining some traction. Let's take our best stuff. Like there's probably 10 or 12 ads in there, and maybe 1 or 2 of them are actually getting, you know, really good, like the higher engagement, or maybe in-app ROAS that seems like it's higher, you know, lower CPCs, like some other secondary metric. So many different metrics, but like a 2.5 versus a 3.5 for a brand new product, like you're on the right track. You're getting there.
Yeah, that was a hypothetical, but
exactly I'm not just saying. I'm saying like that's how you kind of do it. Like you look at them as 2 separate things, because I think, you know, in this particular customer, like they have the right goal in mind. Like they're like, all right, we have a product that really sells. At a certain point, maybe we'll saturate the market, maybe we won't. But so we need to diversify. Plus, we're sitting on this other inventory. We want to get rid of it.
Right.
You know, so I get it.
You need to do it. Absolutely. It's egregious to not do. Test for sure. Like I would say, like it would be if we have all these things sitting in a warehouse and it's a similar product to our best-selling product, absolutely test it. Out of 10 products, you might find 2 that are just as good as your main one, and now your 12 million goal turned into a 36 million goal over the next 3 years. Excellent. Yeah, but the way to execute that is with all hands on deck, saying, "Aha, can this jeopardize why we're all here to begin with?"
Yeah, and you never know. You might find a couple of products that actually
are better.
That's
or people buy that product and then they buy your best-selling product, and now MER is even greater because you have higher LTVs. So many things we can talk about.
There's so many different things.
I want to jump into a couple of Q&As.
Yeah, I'm going to get into the questions. I'll read them off to you, Rattle. Concrete Repairman LLC. That's like the greatest name ever. Yes.
SEO right there.
Yes to many. What do I do when blank? It does depend 100%. Oh, so he's just agreeing with like, it always depends.
Yeah.
Concrete Repairman LLC is a smart guy.
He also said, however, would you agree that there are certain general strategies to take for a specific situation goal? Figure out which one works best. Absolutely. What's interesting is the strategies are vast and multifaceted and even layered, but the measurement should not be. The measurement should be very, very static. You can use other influencing metrics, but what you are measuring to that goal has to be rock solid. And I love the fact that you actually asked this concrete, because Dave then also says, I'm not going to skip anybody, but Dave says, why use MER versus total revenue, total ad spend, and just look at total profit over time? MER is your ratio to your blended metrics. So when you look at, so it's not versus, use total revenue as your target, but the way to measure that is MER. So for example, if I need $10 million in total revenue, Dave, I couldn't say, okay, I'm going to spend 50 million to get there. Well, I achieved the goal, but I have a 0.3 MER. Like, okay, now I'm homeless, but you hit the goal. Like, so that's why you say I can hit the total revenue goal, but I can't lose money getting that total revenue, because it's not regardless of spend. It's how much can I spend to hit the total revenue without losing a profit.
Right.
So if you want to look at total profit over time, my question is, those have a lot of other miniature factors to do, which is what has good LTV, what works organically versus doesn't organically. Do I have to pay for that sale? When you don't have to pay for your sale, your MER increases. How much more can I lean on my email and SMS to continue with that LTV, so I don't have to spend additional incremental dollars by bringing in people back to have an LTV, which also increases MER. So all those things then say is what's best strategy can I use to increase the MER as much as possible to achieve that revenue total.
Right. I think also, and to the point of what Dave mentions here, is like he's thinking about total profit. Like profit, like at the end of the day, I've done many videos on this. It's like the aim of business is profit, because you have to actually.
That's the only reason why we're all here.
No profit, no people. Right. So hard to achieve your vision when you're not profitable, unless you just have, lots of VC money, or you're Jeff Bezos when he first started Amazon. Or if you profitability for 10 years. But
or if you want to run kind of halfway correctly and not be profitable, but still bring in a ton of money, you're the government.
yeah, absolutely. They need to stop right at a deficit and just keep borrowing money from the Federal Reserve. That's a whole other conversation. So anyway, but you have to know what your ideal MER is based upon what your targeted profitability percentage is, and like every business has to understand that. And then you figure out what it costs to acquire a customer, and then you figure out MER based upon that. So
and we have a whole segment that we've actually shot individual videos on all these MPIs, NCAC, AOV, NAOV versus CPA and in-app ROAS, blah blah blah. So there's a whole bunch of more stuff coming out. Ben's actually asks, he says, love your work, guys. Insanely valuable. Thank you, Benz. Really appreciate that. Says, how do you convince client to let you start using MER as the main KPI if they don't really want to change? And that is a great question. I spent the last, 3 years ago, I spent a year doing this. My number one thing that I've always gone back to is the reason why you would get fired. That's what I would tell the client. I would say, if I can keep your media efficiency ratio above a 4 and I can scale your spend and your revenue, would you be happy and profitable but fire me because one campaign has a 68% ROAS? Then the flip side, if you're hemorrhaging cash, firing people, closing down your shop, and now you are losing your 20-year dream of the business you want to be successful with, but I came to you and said, yeah, but I have a 500% ROAS in that campaign, would you say, okay, I'm going to keep you on board? So the people will only fire you off of MER, period. You all have been fired off of MER. That's it. That is every single scenario outside of like the minority of it, just like, hey, you took my website down. But what I'm saying is, you never had a client say, I'm profitable and scaling, but that campaign doesn't look good, you're fired. That's the biggest thing to understand, is they will never fire you when the MER is good, and they are always happy when the MER is good. Try to measure MER, show how you're influencing MER, and keeping that static or even maybe a little bit better at a slow and nice incremental scale. Because once you've proven that out, they will trust you. They trust profitability. Your explanations as to what you're making are not attributed because that looks like that. I'm going to do this here. It's, I'm going to engage this target because I believe I will go through the funnel. This way I will spend only this amount of money there so that my MER looks good. So that's the biggest aha moment, is you will never be fired on a very healthy and scaling revenue and static MER. That's everybody on this call.
I will say this though, you, the individual who's managing that client, has to change the narrative in a forceful, and we're going to give you the tools here to be able to help you with this, in a forceful and knowledgeable manner. Because at the end of the day, they're not hiring you for a 300% ROAS on Facebook. They are hiring you because they want more MER. They just might not realize it.
Yeah.
So that's why these MPIs are so important, for you to understand them and be able to be armed with something that then says, this is the stuff that really matters. And maybe we've measured it differently in the past. And I've seen you do this in a couple of client calls where it's like, you're emphatic about it. And they're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When you explain it and you can back it up, it becomes back to business metrics versus marketing tactics and, in-app metrics that can lead you astray. I know we've only got just a minute or so left here. I just want to make sure that we get to everybody who has asked a question or just about, and obviously, when it's when when we do these, when we have like a little bit more than like 15 minutes to prepare for it, we'll certainly have a whole lot more customer interaction. So there's a couple of more questions here on NCAC, which we can probably get to in the next live. But the goal here is to be on these every Friday. We just have to pick a day and time, and then have it on a regular recurring schedule.
Sorry, Umair asked a question. I appreciate we brought to our attention. How do you reduce the cost of new customers and CAC? I know we're over time, but here is the first thing. when you're looking at your benchmarking metrics, which is another live and another video that we're going to be looking at, if you're looking at multiple sequences of a customer journey where they find out about you, where they click, where they be remarketed, where they convert, where the LTV, you should understand the customer journey first. You will never affect NCAC unless you truly understand how much you're paying for each part of the customer journey. Once you identify that, you're going to see areas that you are overspent on, or if you increase in only that specific area because you're trying to force a section to do the heavy lifting of all sections, like push more remarketing to help everything, you'll see that that will become inefficient and your NCAC will go up as you add in more ad spend to that particular area. You will only be able to reduce NCAC by saying, this takes way too long. I'm spending way too much bringing too many people in, and I'm not actually bringing everyone else through the journey. I'm overspent on my awareness campaigns, or I'm underspent on my consideration campaigns to really keep selling the awareness campaign. You're overspent in a part of a journey. When you find out the overspent in the part of the journey and you pull that back, you'll see NCAC reduce, volume will not change, and your cost will become less because that was overspent.
Yeah. We could do a whole show.
Oh my God, it's gonna be so good.
Just on that.
I'm so excited.
Wait. I'm so excited.
But wait, there's more.
Or wait, there's more.
2 more MPIs for the price of 2.
That's right. That's right. Our MPI lead magnet is almost done, John. It'll be done by Thursday night, so people can actually, go walk along, sort of go along with all these acronyms that we're throwing out here. But anyway, this has been tremendous. Thanks for everyone who did come last minute notice here. We'll figure out, these are going to be on Fridays. Friday's a great day. Not this Friday, but moving forward. Everyone. Yeah, we'll let everyone know on our socials what time that will be. It's like herding cats between my schedule and John's schedule. So we will figure that out. And we've got a lot of stuff to talk about here. A lot of really interesting things, which is very exciting because I don't see anybody talking about this, John Moran.
No,
so,
but it's weird because you even see inside of the questions and answers, it's like, oh, I understand. Like, this makes sense. Like, very about like, it's hard to deny this, but it's very hard to get there unless you've been doing this for 10 years with hundreds of millions of dollars and spend and thousands of clients. Like, this is what you learn.
Yeah. Well, this is what we hope to educate you on and help you understand it, because this is where marketing is going. This is where the puck is going, as Wayne Gretzky says. It's not where it's been. So Awesome. Thanks so much, John Moran, for this Tier 11 live. Thanks for everybody for coming on. Can't wait to see you on the next one, and we'll post on our socials when exactly that is, probably about in a week and a half. All right. Awesome. So until then,
thanks, everyone.
See ya.
Bye-bye.